President Trump has won the battleground state of Florida.
The state of Minnesota has been projected to go in the Biden column.
This is a fraud. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Projecting the winner of Michigan, Biden.
Wisconsin to flip for Joe Biden.
I'm confident we'll emerge victorious.
If Biden holds his lead in Arizona, holds his lead in Nevada, that would equal exactly 270 electoral votes for him.
Welcome to Post Live's Election Daily. I'm Bob Costa. Here's where we are. Earlier today, President Trump tweeted, "Stop the count." That was as officials in several battleground states continue to tally legally cast ballots. And Democratic nominee Joe Biden moved within 17 electoral votes of being able to claim victory. Per the Washington Post, here at the Post, Arizona, Alaska, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada remain uncalled. But we're all watching that Nevada count in particular as the votes continue to come in this afternoon and be tallied. It's razor-thin margin. Vice President Biden ahead for the moment. We'll keep an eye on that all afternoon. But today on our show, on Election Daily, two congressional leaders, Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri and Representative Val Demings of Florida, plus the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, Kate Gallego. She will join us to talk about the count in that state. But first, the headlines. The Keystone State is the Keystone. While we're all watching the Nevada count today, and that could bring Biden closer to 270, Pennsylvania, with its extended count, remains the political battleground of political battlegrounds in America. But let's not forget, the Senate right now, it's at a deadlock. We're pretty sure, if things go along as they are, that Republicans are in a good position to keep the Senate majority. But it now looks like there could be two Senate runoff races in Georgia as David Perdue, the incumbent Republican, falls below 50% in the count, setting off a possible runoff in a few months. That will be the battle royale for political reporters to go cover in the lame duck period if that pans out. Two Senate races in Georgia in a runoff. And the big picture here, too, is that the election reveals a deeper divide in the country. I wrote with Phil Rucker today on today's A1 about this. And real quick, you look at the numbers, what we're studying here at the Post, Vice President Biden doing very well in suburban and urban areas. He stoked the vote in those areas compared to Hillary Clinton in 2016. But you see President Trump so strong in rural and ex-urban areas. And that divide in the nation, which is almost tribal in its nature, as Cornell Belcher, a pollster, told us, really reflects now the divide in Washington. And speaking of that divide in Washington, I would like to bring in our first guest, Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. He's a member of the Republican leadership in the Senate. He's also a former Secretary of State in Missouri. Senator Blunt, good to have you here this afternoon. Senator Blunt, you heard what I said at the top. President Trump has said stop the count as officials continue to count in different battleground states. Do you agree with the president?
Well, I think we have to count every legally cast vote. I agree with the president if he thinks there's a reason in some states that ballots are being counted outside what the law of that state allows. But I don't agree that we can stop the count before the ballots that were cast by people cast according to state law are all counted. And in any campaign, if you're ahead, you'd like to stop the count no matter what, even if you think you're still going to be ahead at the end of the count. But I think every legally cast ballot needs to be counted. I think that's the president's view, as I understand it, in Arizona, and maybe not his view somewhere else. But I don't think we get to decide from state to state what our standard is for how we complete an election cycle.
What is your view, Senator, of the integrity of this election? The Washington Post, per its reporting, has found no evidence of widespread voter fraud. The FBI director in recent months has testified there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. What's your view on the matter?
Well, Bob, I watched this really closely. As you pointed out, I was the chief election official in our state for 8 years. I was a county election official at a time before that. I've watched this really closely. I do think that the election system itself is more secure than it has ever been. Certainly real difference that the president deserves some credit for from where we were in 2016, when about mid-October, Jay Johnson, the head of Homeland Security, announced to the world and to election officials in America that he decided that the election infrastructure was critical infrastructure, and the federal government was going to play a new and different role than they ever have before. And state and local election officials just said, absolutely not. You cannot come in at the last minute and take over this process. And the federal government didn't take over the process, but in the 4 years between then and now has really developed a partnership where state and local officials have access to cyber information, to security information, to ways to monitor their systems that they haven't had before. That doesn't do anything about the false information that may be out there in the social media, but the election structure itself is secure as it's ever been. And that doesn't mean that in a jurisdiction here and there couldn't be some fraud going on. I think you used the term very little fraud. This is an election where a little fraud could make a big difference, and we don't want to assume naively that nobody is going to do anything wrong, but the election structure is, in my view, the most secure it's ever been, and our state and local officials, along with their federal partners, deserve a lot of credit for that. I chair the Rules Committee, which is the committee in the Senate that has a responsibility for election areas, and then I'm on the Intel Committee, and we've had lots of intelligence discussions about what we were doing to make these elections more secure, including fighting back against anybody who reaches out and tries to get in our system or even to provide false information from other countries in our system.
That's a pretty even-tempered response to my question, Senator. What's your advice to President Trump when it comes to his rhetoric? Should he cool it down about the election or not?
Well, the people on the other side didn't cool it down for 4 years. I fully understand his frustration. And by the way, he did an incredible job putting so much of this campaign on his own back, and the energy and determination of particularly the last couple of months, and particularly the weeks after he got out of the hospital from having COVID, were extraordinary. I think 15 events in the last 72 hours of the campaign. He put his heart into this. He deserves to have a sense that the final count is what the final count really was. And he had 4 years of the other side not accepting the result of the last election. I don't think it's unreasonable for him to be frustrated that suddenly he's supposed to just decide that there were no problems and he would accept everything and not have the kinds of constant resistance. The FBI did it, the Russians did it, the Electoral College was the problem. I think for our friends on the other side to say the president needs to accept the results, they need to look at where they've been for the last 4 years before they give a lot of advice about anybody accepting the results.
What will you do as a U.S. Senator or a Republican leader if President Trump is defeated, but he does not accept the results and he does not concede?
Oh, I'm confident that he will. And I've heard him say that in the last month, that he wants to have a fair count, a fair process. I'm chairing the inauguration again this time, and I'm confident that on January the 20th, the winner of the presidential election will be sworn in. And once again, we will have every former president that could possibly be there, the Congress, the Supreme Court, sending that message to the world that this is how a democracy acts. And I'm confident the president will do what he needs to do. And I fully understand how he has invested himself in hoping he's going to be sworn in for a second term. And there are lots of reasons that he should think that. The foreign policy achievements, the economic achievements that he has dedicated himself to have been important. And let's see what happens before we start hypothetically thinking about what's going to happen between now and
Fair
January
enough.
the
Fair enough, Senator Blunt. But you did say just now that it's the inauguration, and I remember you 4 years ago, right there on the dais, your central figure in the transition of power in this country, helping to manage the inauguration. Let's say President Trump wins re-election. How important would it be for that image of the country, the functioning of democracy, for Vice President Biden to attend the inauguration?
I think very important, and I would expect him to be there. For several elections now, the way the election process has worked out, the person that lost the election was sitting right there on the platform with the person that won the election, whether it was Vice President Gore in the Bush-Gore election or Secretary Clinton. She and President Clinton were there at the last inauguration. Obviously, John McCain as a senator was there. It's a great message to send to the world. And I think, as I recall the numbers, I think about 43 million people watched this live, and tens of millions of other people all over the world watched the inauguration. And we send one of the greatest messages we send as a country. I would expect Vice President Biden to be there if he's not elected, or President Trump to be there if he's not elected. And I think that's an important moment, and it teaches a lesson that we can't teach as effectively any other way.
So if you flip the question, if President Trump is defeated, you said you expect him to attend, but would you request, as a Republican leader running the inauguration, for him to attend?
Yes. I don't think I'd have to do that, but the President Obama, President Trump, and I rode from the White House to the Capitol together in the last inauguration. One of the great moments for me as an elected official to get to be part of the three of us in the car as this transition of power occurs. But let's see what the results are before we spend a lot of time talking about who should do what based on the results. And again, I'm going to repeat, our friends on the other side it's hard to imagine they could have been much more diligent in their efforts not to accept the result of the last election. And they should think about that as they talk about what President Trump should do if he happens not to be the person to be sworn in for the office of president this coming January.
Senator Blunt, take us a little bit behind the curtain, if you could, as you look ahead to the inauguration in January, regardless of who's putting their hand in the air and taking the oath of office. We are in the middle of a global pandemic. Will there even be a crowd encouraged to assemble on the National Mall, or will this be more of a private or quiet ceremony at the Capitol?
Well, Bob, there are a couple of reasons that we haven't decided that yet. The committee, the 6-person committee, Senator Klobuchar, Senator McConnell, and I from the Senate side, and Congressman Hoyer and McCarthy and Speaker Pelosi from the House side. Our first action was to move forward as if we were going to have a traditional inauguration. I think it's easier to scale back than it is to scale up. We don't know everything we'll know in a few weeks, but we clearly know that this is not the normal circumstance. I think visiting after the election is settled, or maybe even sooner than that, with the person who's elected or likely to be elected or could be elected, if we don't have a firm sense on this pretty quickly. And say, one of the things we want to do is talk about what you want, and then let's see, even though this part of the inauguration is up to the Congress, what happens at the Capitol is up to this committee chosen by the Congress. What you do with all of the other things of the inaugural activities is that separate committee that is paid for by donations, and you put that together. This is a committee that ultimately the Congress will decide what happens at the Capitol as we host the president being sworn in. But what would you like to see happen? Based on the two campaigns we saw, we might have two very different views of what that inauguration would look like to try to work around as we do that. But I think everybody wants the inauguration to be safe. Obviously, want it to be secure. It's a great lesson that we teach on inaugural day, but it's also a moment of real vulnerability for our government as we create this attractive target of
Right.
This coming together of so many significant parts of the American political story, and we'll see.
I've been reading the history books a little bit, Senator, and now the inaugurations face the National Mall. But for many years, they face the Supreme Court, and that's a smaller area. I was wondering maybe Senator Blunt and Senator Klobuchar would think about that as an option. But let's move for a moment to the Senate races. The Senate, you have two possible runoffs now in Georgia, as you know, and the Senate looks like to be a deadlock. What does this mean for the chances of a stimulus in the lame duck?
Well, I'm never very optimistic about the lame duck. I did see on yesterday that the majority leader, Senator McConnell, said he'd like to get a stimulus package put together and also would like to see the spending bills done. Those would both be a good thing for the country and for whoever is about to become president. I'd like to see us have some more cooperation here on a scale, on a bill that makes sense for now, that we can create consensus around and get that done. I think the lame duck is always a more challenging moment than we think it's going to be. People trying to get themselves wrapped around the results of the election. 8 years ago when President Obama was being inaugurated, I argued vigorously that the Democrats should help us get the appropriating work done so he could start with a virtual clean slate. That didn't happen. I was advocating the same thing 4 years ago. That didn't happen. I'm going to say again this year, let's get this year's work done this year, and let's let the new term of the president start with as clean a slate as we can give them to start their own discussion of what they want to see happen. I hope we can do that. I think it's a little early to sense that. Usually it's harder to do things in the lame duck than anybody thinks it's going to be.
Final question, Senator. You probably saw a report in Axios earlier today that Senate Republicans are prepared to block many of President Biden's nominees, should it be a President Biden. Is that the case? You're in the cloakroom. You're in touch with all the Republican senators. If it is a President Biden, I know you hate these hypotheticals, but if it is a President Biden, are you ready to work with a President Biden, or are you ready to block his nominees?
Well, we only have one president at a time, and the reason the Senate is in the process is that they have to be considered as a partner in that process if you want to have things happen. Senator Langford and I advocated a rule change that we got done this year that dramatically shortened the time of a debate that a nominee had to have for most of these positions. Still 30 hours for the cabinet and Supreme Court judges and circuit judges. Almost everybody else is 2 hours. And why did we do that? On a partisan basis? Because the Democrats were insisting on 30 hours on every nominee. And I think the average time being used in that 30 hours that had to be set aside was 17 minutes. So the change that we required for this president after the first 2 years just finally gave up on having the accommodations that the Senate had traditionally created for these kinds of nominees. That change is going to benefit this president, whoever's sworn in, and others in the future. But there's a Senate role to be played here, and we'll play it. But I think we also should remember we have one president at a time. That president, particularly with jobs that end when the president leaves, we need to think about how to get those jobs filled. I wish our friends on the other side would have worked harder to work with us to fill the jobs that President Trump needed to get filled 4 years ago. And right up until now.
Senator Blunt, appreciate your time this afternoon. Hope you come back to Washington Post Live sometime soon.
Be with you, Bob.
Thank you, Senator. Now we'll be joined by Democratic Congresswoman who represents a Democratic Congresswoman who represents Florida's 10th congressional district. She is a fierce supporter of Vice President Biden. Representative Val Demings, welcome to Washington Post Live Election Daily. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you.
So what happened in Florida? I know you were working hard on the ground for the Democrats, but to see it go to President Trump and to see him make inroads with Black voters, Latino voters, what's your blunt take on what happened?
Well, Robert, one thing we always try to make clear in Florida, and we've watched at least for the last 20 years in Florida, it's always a close state, usually within 1 percentage point. It can go either way. And look, we realize that we've just got more work to do here on the ground in Florida. We've got to make sure that we are talking to as many voters as possible, making sure that we are addressing their specific needs and not making any assumptions about what voters, because they're in a particular voting block or zip code or in a particular ethnic group, that they share the same values and concerns. And so what we do realize in Florida, as we really have for a while now, we thought we had done enough or had done, enough to get by, but apparently not. We still have a lot of work to do here on the ground, and we're committed to doing it.
Were the president's comments about socialism during the campaign effective in a place like Miami-Dade, where you have a strong Cuban American population?
I have to believe that they were. Some polls that were taken showed that 70% of Cubans certainly supported the president. About 66% of Puerto Ricans supported Vice President Biden. And so, we do believe that the president's rhetoric about socialism, although not true, certainly had an impact and an influence. Apparently, we did not do a good enough job to fight back against that. But we've got to shake it off now. We're trying to close out this presidential race and move forward and look to the next election. Even though the next elections will be in an off year, we know that every election counts. And so, as I said, we still have a ways to go and some work to do.
And it seems like the Republicans representative are going to keep up that rally cry. I was listening to Senator McConnell's speech on Tuesday night. He kept using the word socialism. So that's a Republican talking point that seems here to stay. But you're very much on the front lines of the racial reckoning in this country, the debate over policing, as a former law enforcement leader, as well as being a member of Congress right now. What needs to be done in the Democratic Party in terms of message, policy proposals to make up ground on that front, not only with Black voters, but with white voters in places like the West Coast of Florida?
Well, Robert, I thank you for that question. And look, the bottom line is every community deserves to be a safe community, regardless of the color of your skin or your ethnic background. And when you talk to every community, as I have as a career law enforcement officer, what they will tell you, Black, brown, and others, is that they don't want to see less police. They actually want to see more police, because when you start cutting budgets and personnel, that they understand as a vulnerable community, they're the ones who will suffer first and suffer the most. And so we really need to make a concerted effort as a caucus to really bring the police and the community together, to not talk about them as if they are two separate entities. The police are the community, and the community is the police. And so it's going to take both to get where we need to be. We also have to understand, and I think make quite clear, that we know the overwhelming majority of law enforcement officers are good, decent people who do the job correctly. But we also understand we've had some problems. We need to look at who we hire. We need to look at diversity. We need to look at policies. We need to look at training. And while we deal with police misconduct, working with our community and legislatively, we also need to address some of the quality of life issues that cause decay in communities in the first place. When we look at the police, we've still got to look at poverty. We've still got to look at wages, low wages. We've still got to look at our unemployment numbers. We've still got to look at the number of young people, black and brown, who drop out of school. We know that every 26 seconds a child drops out of school. And if we look at our prisons around the country, we know that the majority are black and brown, and we also, Robert, know that the majority are high school dropouts. And so we have to do a better job. Let's work on police misconduct, but let's deal with those quality of life issues. And I do believe we can make great progress if we do that.
Let's turn to the House Democrats. You are as inside as you can get. You're close to Vice President Biden, close to Speaker Pelosi. I've been talking to my sources in your conference, that House Democrats, frankly, are rattled by the Republican gains in the House. What's the mood behind the scenes?
Well, let me say this. The work that we need to do right in front of us is for the race to be called for the President of the United States. And we know, in spite of all of the distractions, the lawsuits that have been filed, the rhetoric that is out there, the number of people showing up at where the votes are being counted, Vice President Biden will soon have enough electoral votes to become the next president of the United States. He has several paths to do that. The president does not. And so we need to get that work done as well. As you know, the Senate, we're still looking at those numbers as well in the Senate. And look, within the House, we've maintained our majority. Yeah, we all have some work to do in this country. I believe that we will do it. But the bottom line is we are a caucus, and we have to operate like a caucus. There is nothing wrong with looking within our caucus to see how can we make improvements, what needs to be improved, what does not, the strengths and the weaknesses. But let's get the work done right before us right now. We lost some amazing colleagues who were in tough districts. Let's not fool ourselves or act like they were not. They were in tough districts. We still have some work to do. We'll get it done. But I can't wait until the presidential race is called. That's the beginning of the work ahead.
So as you go about that work and make that effort, Representative, you do have to wonder who's going to be the leader of that. Do you support Speaker Pelosi for another term as Speaker, holding the gavel?
I certainly do. I remember when I was sworn in 2017, we were not in the majority in the House. And if you remember, the president's first priority was to repeal the Affordable Care Act and take health care away from over 20 million individuals. We were not in the majority, but I watched Speaker Pelosi, my first term as a freshman member, really very strategically, very carefully make decisions to fight for, unify us as a caucus. And as you well know, the Affordable Care Act is still the law of the land. You've seen her at the White House, and the lack of leadership really show exceptional leadership to try to get an infrastructure package through that would help bring millions of jobs to the American people. You've also seen her usher through some of the largest relief packages in the history of our country to get checks and resources into the hands of the American people to protect those small businesses that are suffering and hurting around our nation. You never know how good a leader is until you see them lead during tough times. We certainly have not seen that in the White House. Total absence of leadership. We've certainly seen that in Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And I certainly, based on the leadership that I have seen her exhibit during tough times, not during calm times, but tough times, I fully support her keeping the gavel.
Understood. So put aside the Speaker race, Speaker Pelosi likely positioned to win again. Are you at least open to a reconsideration of House Majority Leader, House Majority Whip, Conference Chair? In other words, should the Democratic leadership beyond Speaker Pelosi at least be given some thought in terms of changes in the coming weeks?
You know, every cycle, Robert, as you well know, we vote on House leadership. Every cycle we do that. But I also believe that we need to, as John Lewis reminded us all the time, let's keep our eyes on the prize. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We have a presidential race that we have been waiting for 4 long years. We have over 9 million people who have contracted COVID-19 as we deal with a public health pandemic. We have well over 230,000 people in this country, which is the greatest country in the world, who have lost their lives. We need to finish the work right before us, and that is to elect Joe Biden as the next president of the United States and Kamala Harris as the next vice president of the United States. Then we can get on the road to recovery and begin the process of healing this nation, bringing us back together, coming up with a unified, strategic, scientifically based response to dealing with the virus. Once we get the virus under control, we can get our economy back on track. And so I'm going to do as John Lewis told me to do, keep my eyes on the prize. Let's finish this race.
What are the chances of a stimulus bill during the lame duck? And will the speaker move pretty quickly on another round of legislation?
You know, I heard Senator Blunt say that it sure would be good, and he thinks it's possible. I have to believe that as well. Robert, we, as I indicated before, the American people are suffering as a result of this pandemic. They've lost their jobs. They're worried about keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. Many small businesses have closed. Too many of them have closed their doors permanently. And so we really have the ability, I hope that we have the will, the political will, to come together and get a relief package done for the American people. And let me just say this, it's been going into the 6th month now since we passed the HEROES Act. And so we know that it's sitting on the majority leader in the Senate's desk with no action. We can get this done. And I hope that when we return back to Washington, that will be our #1 priority.
What about the Biden cabinet? One, are you open for consideration for a position? And two, who else should be considered?
Well, I certainly won't get into that. I'm trying to keep as many
so you're not closing the door.
No, let me say, no, when you ask who else should be considered, I'm not getting in to that.
Okay.
Let me say this. One of the things that I have tried to make clear during the vetting process and beyond is that I want to support President Biden in the best way that I can. We do know that he is going to need as much support in Congress as he can get. Now, the good thing is he, unlike soon to be his predecessor as president, has the relationships, has the ability to work effectively across the aisle to get things done. Believe me, Robert, as you well know, there is plenty of legislative work to be done in the House and in the Senate. We have about 350 bills that have been sitting in the Senate waiting for action. And so what I do know, back to your question, is I want to be as helpful to the administration as I possibly can be. But I'm going to go back to, we need Joe Biden declared as the winner of the presidential race. Then we all can start worrying about or considering or discussing who will be a part of his cabinet. Regardless of where I am, I will continue to work hard. I will work hard for his administration and continue to work hard for the American people.
Final question here, Representative. Knowing, of course, you want to see the presidential race concluded before you start thinking about anything else, we'll just concede that point. Gut check. 2022, you're now on the national radar with the vice presidential search. You're increasing national profile. Are you thinking about a run for governor?
I'm thinking about, Robert, the work. As you know, we were also in the House. I was just reelected. to the House to serve my third term. And you know, the road has been a very humbling one, but also one that's full of hope with my constituents in Congressional District 10. And I am not going to get ahead of myself about what the next road is, or the next job is, or the next plan is. I'm going to stay focused and keep my eyes on the prize, on the work that I am doing right now. I think my constituents deserve that. I hear from them every day about the issues that they are facing, especially as a result of COVID-19. And so I want to be there for them 100%, not half the way, but all the way.
Representative Demings, we'll leave it there. Appreciate you stopping by and having this conversation, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. You take care. Stay safe.
You too. Now let's go to the Sun Belt, from the Deep South to the Sun Belt, and welcome the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, Kate Gallego. Mayor Gallego, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Washington Post has not yet called Arizona, but what is the latest in your state in terms of the count?
Fox News and the AP have called Arizona for Biden. Vice President Biden is leading by about 70,000 votes. There are still about 300,000 ballots outstanding, primarily in Maricopa County, which is the home county for Phoenix. I would say the mood among Democrats in Arizona is better than the mood among Republicans, but everyone is eagerly awaiting the updates as they come.
Was the AP wrong, Fox News wrong? I mean, is it possible, Mayor, that Maricopa County could save President Trump?
It is still mathematically possible, but it looks right now like it will go in a different direction. The nation may have remembered 2 years ago, watching for results from Arizona, there were several Democrats in statewide offices who on election day were losing, and then 6 days later we had Senator-elect Kyrsten Sinema. So it took us quite a while, but if the last election cycle is a good indicator, these what we call late early ballots have trended towards Democrats overall, although certainly Maricopa County is a purple county. Maricopa County was the largest county in the country to vote for Donald Trump in the last election cycle, and as we sit here today, it is the largest county in the country to have flipped for Vice President Biden.
That's fascinating, Mayor. And I believe Maricopa went for Senator Sinema 2 years after going for President Trump. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we're about 60% of the population. So generally, as goes Maricopa County, goes Arizona, but there have been 2 anomalies, I think, where someone has managed to have such a lead in rural Arizona that's overcome our very populous county.
Help us understand, Mayor, why that is. The Sun Belt, we hear a lot about it. We write about it at the Washington Post. You hear it in the national news. Democrats want to make some gains in the Sun Belt, Arizona, Maricopa in focus. What's going on in the political landscape in Maricopa? How is it a place that goes for President Trump so much in 2016, then goes to a moderate Democrat, a more centrist Democrat at least, and Senator Sinema? What are the political currents in Maricopa? Help us understand these numbers and the driving dynamics.
Phoenix has been the fastest growing city in the country, and we sit in the fastest growing county. We've had many people moving in from California, Illinois, and other traditionally Democratic communities who have continued that Democratic affiliation. We've also seen a pronounced increase in Latinos voting in our community, almost doubling between 2016 and 2020. That's a result of a lot of people working hard to organize, to engage. It's driven by Latinas in particular, and young people have come out in a big way. We've seen a 55% increase in 18 to 29 voting. So a lot of changing demographics here, as well as some very high profile endorsements. Our former GOP Senator Jeff Flake and the beloved Cindy McCain going for Joe Biden made some conservative voters feel comfortable that they could make a vote that felt a little bit different for them.
What was the McCain factor this time around? The late senator, not of course on the campaign trail, his wife though, making her endorsement. What's the McCain voter like in your city, and how did they move?
Senator McCain is beloved here in Arizona. People talk about his legacy all the time. Particularly some of our more moderate voters really like the get it done attitude focused on results and country over party. So the McCain endorsement was meaningful. We also have a very strong veteran and military community in Arizona. And when Cindy McCain talked about her family's military service, her husband's military service, I think that was meaningful to a lot of voters. The way the President Trump has spoken about Senator McCain's military service has been concerning for many Arizonans.
Why were Democrats disappointed on election night about the Latino vote? You said the Latino vote has been a positive point for Democrats in Arizona, but nationally, many Democrats were taken aback by how it's trending toward Republicans in certain areas. What do you make of the results, especially with the Latino vote?
I think it's very important to look at the Latino vote across the country. Our Latino community is very different than the Latino community in Florida. In Arizona, our largest percentage of the Latino community is of Mexican heritage, although our community, like others, is very diverse. Latinos in Arizona went for Biden by a 2-to-1 margin. So that is a very different result than we did see in, for example, the Cuban community. But here it seems that the Latino community is going to be essential to the Biden margin.
What is the Latino community like in Phoenix, in Arizona? You say it's different, of course, it's not. Maybe Florida has a lot of Cuban Americans. What about Phoenix? What about Arizona?
So Phoenix is a 40% Latino community, and our community with Mexican heritage is by far the largest. It is a very young community in general, so our Latino community is much younger than Maricopa County in general. Traditionally, our younger voters had not come out in the ways that they did this year, but a variety of different efforts led by the Latino community itself has changed that, as well as some pretty significant investment from Tom Steyer, NextGen, and other groups. There was a huge push to register high school students who were eligible to vote, and that's something I had not seen before. There was also a lot of engagement with our Native American community in a really organized way, and it seems to have changed the outcomes of many elections, including our presidential vote.
If Vice President Biden becomes President-elect Biden and President Biden, does he have some work to do with Latino voters? President Trump has made a point of attacking the Obama-Biden record on immigration regarding DACA and other issues. What would your advice be to the vice president, should he be president, about reaching out to the Latino community and bolstering Democratic support?
I think in our Latino community and just generally in Arizona, we would love to see forward motion on immigration policy. I don't talk to anyone who thinks that, it's hard to find people who think the status quo is working on immigration. So it would be great to see some early achievements from Vice President, future President Biden in that area. But our Latino community cares about a lot of issues. Healthcare has been very important. Our education system is very important. And so I wouldn't ever paint the Latino community as focused on a single issue. You have to work hard on multiple issues to earn that vote.
Democrats nationwide were disappointed by the Senate races. For the most part, they were hoping to take the Senate majority. They might still do so, but it's very narrow right now. It's in a deadlock. Yet when they look at your state, Arizona, and Democrat Mark Kelly, they see a ray of sunshine politically, some hope. What's the lesson, the takeaway from the Mark Kelly Senate race in Arizona?
Mark Kelly is a dream candidate for Arizona. He's very independent and results focused. A very inspiring story. His parents were police officers. He worked his way up through the military and then through the space program. So it's a real American success story. And we also all love to be the home state of Gabby Giffords. So that marriage and that personal touch and their advocacy together to take a horrible personal experience and turn it into a vision for a better healthcare system, I think that touched a lot of Arizona hearts. So I guess the lesson for Democrats is it really matters who the candidates are and how they can tell their story about what brings them to running for office.
When you look at Mark Kelly and Senator Sinema, do you see two people who would be moderate Democrats in the Senate? Is that kind of the pathway to keeping power in Arizona, or do they also have progressive sides to them? How do you see that political positioning, their personas, as they grow their base in Arizona?
Arizona voters seem very focused on results. What bills can you pass? How can you improve quality of life? Senator Sinema has pushed so hard on COVID-19 protections this year. She's been a strong voice for taking public health seriously. If there's another headline coming out of Arizona, it's that elected officials and candidates who took COVID-19 seriously did very well on election day.
Speaking of the pandemic, being a mayor is a challenge during a global pandemic. Based on our reporting and others, Phoenix seems to have, they had a spike. Arizona had a spike. What's it at now in your city? And are you worried about the winter season, though, of course, it's warmer out there in Arizona?
Arizona was a national and international hotspot this summer. We were one of the last states for our governor to go to stay at home and one of the first to reemerge from stay at home. We still do not have some basic safety precautions at the state level, such as a mask requirement. We do have one in the city of Phoenix, but we had breaking news today in Arizona. One of the county health departments in a community that doesn't have a mask requirement has had to go to virtual because of an outbreak tied to a baby shower. I think that's a lesson to all of us. It seems that in Arizona, a lot of the increase we've been seeing recently is tied to smaller events, often with family or coworkers, where it's trusted people you already know, and so you assume you can let your guard down. But I think the Yavapai County Health Department is a good reminder for all of us. With Thanksgiving and other holidays coming up, you can get COVID from people who you've known all your life, and we have to be careful. We've, in this community, reported a 16% positive rate, so we are concerned about the trend.
You just won, Mayor, a decisive re-election victory in Phoenix. Congratulations on that. And we've talked a lot about the political trends in Arizona, but is it more about the management of the pandemic when it comes to your race that led to your big win? How do you see your own political profile and how it went on Tuesday?
During my time as mayor, we've had some huge steps forward on community safety, major expansion of advanced industries such as semiconductor manufacturing. But if there was one issue I heard about over and over again, it was COVID-19. My opponent really criticized me for having too many precautions, but what I heard from voters is they want to take public health seriously. We have a lot of jobs tied to industries such as tourism that have not come back yet, particularly our wealthiest tourists who love we have pretty amazing weather right now, but they are not coming back. And it sent a message to me that a good economic policy is putting public health at the forefront. It appears that voters agreed in my race and many others. In some of my neighboring Republican cities, the candidates who had the strongest message that COVID-19 is a serious problem emerged victorious.
And with all respect, Mayor, to your fair city, I've been to Phoenix many times. I love going there because I'm a baseball fan, and I go to see spring training when fans could actually go to spring training and enjoy it. And my first impression of your city was it was pretty older in terms of the population. People moved to Phoenix to retire, but they have a young mayor. What does your own position as a leader of this major American city say about the power of the younger vote in Phoenix, in Arizona, and perhaps even nationally?
I'm going to have to give you a better tour of Phoenix because we actually are younger than average as compared to the United States. We have great burgeoning sectors in healthcare, bioscience, and technology, startups. Arizona State University, which is in the greater Phoenix area, is the #1 college degree producer in the country. So we have a lot of great workforce, of relatively affordable housing, and it's been a neat economic mix. As our community has grown, it has really been working families that have powered that growth. So I don't know that I'm a huge anomaly as a mom in her 30s in terms of the demographics of Phoenix, although certainly different from many of my predecessors in this particular job.
And final question here, Mayor, a little bit of a downbeat question, but it's very real. As much as Phoenix is changing and this country has different currents in it that people find positive in both parties, it also has a darker side. And you have faced threats. Other Democratic governors have faced threats. You as a Democratic mayor have faced threats. Are you worried about the political culture in Arizona, even as Democrats do better? What are your concerns on that front?
I think Americans are hungry for elected officials to work together across party lines, and I hope to be part of the solution. Although some issues have gotten very political on a variety of issues like expanding our airport, protecting our water supply, we get unanimous bipartisan agreement at the city, and I think we're going to have to deliver a lot more of that to help repair some of the strong emotions in this country. It's been a tough year, and we've had a lot of very vigorous debates. Policy debates are healthy, but I hope we can keep it to words and not any threats of violence or actions.
Mayor Kate Gallego of Phoenix, Arizona, really appreciate your time this afternoon. I mean, you are in a place that every political junkie, every reporter is watching closely, and you'll be on the front lines as the parties clash and evolve in the coming years. So thanks very much for being here.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us for another edition of Election Daily here at Washington Post Live. Really appreciate you coming by on an afternoon where you're probably keeping an eye, like I am, on the returns in Nevada. So I haven't actually seen the latest updates, but we will make sure we update you tomorrow. I will have another conversation this afternoon. I love doing Washington Post Live because you get to talk to leaders who are in the middle of the debate, not on the sidelines. And we're going to talk to Phil Murphy, the Democratic governor of New Jersey, at 3 p.m. Eastern this afternoon. And he is someone who is dealing with the pandemic, just like the mayor of Phoenix, Kate Gallego. Governor Murphy has worked actually with the Trump administration. So we'll hear from him at 3 p.m. And we'll also have on Friday, First Look with Jonathan Capehart. That will begin at 9 a.m. on Friday. And I will have another edition of Election Daily, 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday. Andrew Yang, he came to the Washington Post a long time ago, not that long ago, but pre-pandemic, to talk about his presidential campaign. We'll talk about the Democratic future, the Biden campaign with him. Andrew Yang, Friday at 1. Also, Atlanta's mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms. As much as we're watching Pennsylvania and Nevada and Arizona, we're watching Fulton County, we're watching Atlanta. Where are the votes there? It's a nail biter in Georgia. So all of that coming up on Washington Post Live. I hope you'll stick with us and be part of these conversations. But for now, I'm Bob Costa, and I'll see you soon.